Hello and welcome to the Corona Yoga Challenge. Today is day 164 and today we're going to be taking a really good look at Badakanasana, which is Tailor pose. So Badakanasana means bound angle pose, konasna is angle, baddha is bound. So this is a simple version of Badakanasana. Feet are what's connected, this is the bound bit, and this is the angle bit, the legs. So we're going to look at Badakanasana. I'm just going to move this a little bit so you can see a little bit better, because the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at different ways that you can adapt Badakanasana to make it more comfortable for you. So Badakanasana is traditionally the soles of the feet together, the toes in together, feet brought in towards you, knees extending out in the direction of the floor. For many people, taking the feet further away is going to be better. So the feet being further away could be to do with the hips and the ankles, or it could be to do with how your back is. Another fix, so for instance from the back, if your feet are in here and you end up kind of rounding, it'd be better to have your feet further away so you can get that nice feeling of a little bit of lift up. Another way to get a feeling of lift up is to take a block or two and stick it underneath your hips. And you might find that then you can bring your feet in much closer and that you feel really comfortable, and you can also get that lift with the spine. Ultimately, this is a kind of hip opener, so it's so important that this whole area, all the way around your knee, there's no sense of stretch over the knee area at all. It's a kind of hip movement, so hip joint, so into the thighs, into the hips. So it could be one block, it could be a higher block, as you would like. Another thing that you can do is that you can take a bit of support so it goes underneath your thighs. So try and think, not that you're supporting the knee, but you're supporting the thigh bone. So if you support just the knee, you can end up with a kind of a bit of a, it can work not quite so well for the knee joint. So think that you're just supporting the thigh, and you can do that on either side with the support, so that then you can allow your legs to settle out and into the pillows really comfortably. So if you come to my normal classes, you'll know we don't spend this long enjoying lots of little bits and bobs. We kind of enjoy keeping moving and we work with what's there. So I'm not taking a massive pile of pillows with me to every yoga class. But the benefit of being at home is that you can use all these things and you can make yourself super comfortable, and then you can really probably get quite a lot out of it. So this is the benefit of being at home, that you can use all these different things so that you get really comfortable Badakanasana. Another thing that you can do is that you can actually support underneath the feet. So if you support underneath the feet, sometimes it makes it more comfortable. In some ways, it almost increases the level of stretch because the feet are lifted up. But it really is about trying it to see how it works for you. Other things that you can do with Badakanasana to make it more comfortable. Sometimes people just like to take a bit of support, so they take a belt around the feet and just take their feet in close, and then you can just hold on to the belt comfortably. I tend not to work like this, but you might like it. Now we're going to look at some ways to, when you're using the pose, how you can adapt it. So one of the things I like to do is I like sometimes to have just my heels touching, so I'm keeping my feet a lot more alert. Sometimes I might work just with the balls of the feet touching, so that I can work with the arches of the feet and the lifting up through the inside of the lower legs. Another thing to think of is the position of the ankle joint. So for instance, this is quite a good movement. So you see I've got the soles of my feet starting to come up. It's a really nice way to stretch through the inside legs. However, this is based on the knees being entirely comfortable and still looking after your back as or your kind of centre view as number one. But it's really nice to work with that feeling of how can the toes work. So can the feet open out, can the toes come up and towards you. So that's a little bit like what we were doing with the pillow. And there's a lovely picture of Vanda doing this, where her feet are, is it Iyengar or is it Vanda? Well, one of the two. And oh my goodness, what a pose. The feet are right up and in, and I think their feet are off the floor. It's like, wow, how did that happen? But lovely to consider. So another thing that you can do just to modify it so that you're changing it if it's not suiting you, if you try all these different variations with pillows and feet and blocks and whatever else, and you're still feeling like, no, this just is really not that fun a pose for me, you can try just loosely crossing the feet so that you have still the width of the knees, so it's wider than a normal cross-legged position, but so you've got the feeling of a bit of a width, but just not quite so much. It just suits some people better. This is just making me think of another thing I quite like doing, and that is connecting the toes to the heel of the other foot, so you get one hip to stretch a little bit more, and from here coming forward is quite nice, so you can focus on the kind of one side of your body more than the other. But then obviously if you're doing that, I would always even myself up so I had the other foot in front then, and I could just ease myself forwards this way. So we're going to look at all the different things that you can do from Tailor pose now. So just so you know, we are on page 19, week 10. Oh my goodness. There's only 14 weeks and we're on week 10. Time just flies when you're enjoying yourself doing yoga. Right, so from a comfortable Tailor pose for you, one of the things is just to twist yourself around. So I would tend to take my hand onto the opposite foot, get a feeling of lifting up and coming round with the rib cage and then easing round comfortably. Sometimes you could think about taking your hand onto the opposite knee, but try and make sure that the shoulder doesn't lift up, so you're always thinking about softening down through the shoulder. And try and think about the hands being gentle on your legs, because it's really easy to kind of do a lot with our hands and our shoulders, but actually this and this is what we're working with mainly here. So nice easy twist, that's a lovely thing that you can do. You can obviously do a forward bend, so you can just take hold of your feet. Well, actually, probably start, you could have your hands just high up and you just do a little forward lean. Then you could walk your hands down. At some point you might want to take hold of your feet so that you can really draw yourself down. But remember, you're drawing yourself around with the centre of your body. You're not using your arms and your hands and so much. So we're focused on where does the physical body, where does the main part of you want to move to. This one is a really, really silly fun one that we do every so often, and it's really good for wakening the feet up and a feeling of like, what is this? So what this is, it would be better if I could zoom you in. I'm not quite sure I'll manage that, but I'll look at it when we get to the next phase, when I get to popping it into iMovie. You're going to interlink your toes, one toe and then the other toe. So it's like you're weaving your toes, so you end up with the funniest little interlocked toe affair, and it feels amazing. When you first start doing it, it can feel really uncomfortable and horrible. But once your toes become a little bit more alive and your feet get a little bit like happier in themselves, you can find this quite an enjoyable thing. Again, if you're doing this, just make sure you realise what toe was at the bottom the first time, and then swap it over so that we're working comfortably. We're working evenly. And there we go, we can end up with the other toes the other way. Bing! Another thing that you can do, we've done the thing where you have just your heels touching. This is quite nice because you get a real feeling of aliveness in the feet and the legs. And sometimes when the feet are together, we can just go into that, feet have gone tired, legs have gone tired, my back's gone tired, kind of blah. So sometimes working just with the feet can give you a feeling of a little bit more alertness and kind of openness and curiosity. So that's one of the main reasons for changing poses, to keep yourself alive. And for some people, they'll be practicing in a way that they just do the same thing again and again and again. So zen, they're in that moment all the time. And if you're that person, great, find the variation that works best for you and stick with it. And if you like a bit of variety and a little bit of change, then go with that as well. So my next one, when we are working with this one, there's different ways to do it. So one way is to have the knees close in, to get a feeling that the legs are drawing up and then the hips are kind of really setting down into the hip joints. And what we're focusing on is the feeling of almost collecting up with the legs, collecting up and into the hip joint, so that we get a feeling of the socket of the leg just sitting into the hip joint. So we can get that feeling where we're working with that really supported, warm, round sense, where you might have your pillows around here. We can also work that other way, which I mentioned earlier, which is where we start to think about the knees extending out and down. If you do that, it's so important that that's not the only thing that you think about. So rather than going, like feet in, legs down, there we go, we've done it, and I'm not breathing properly, but my legs are further down. Try to think of it, or to keep coming back to that whole body thing, so that yes, you can work with the feeling of the knees coming down, but make sure there's still that feeling of life in your tummy, there's still that feeling of openness in the shoulders, that you're still happy and enjoying whatever it is that you're doing. One thing that often, it depends what other things you've done other than yoga, but often people will be really hands down on the legs, really push them down, make the pelvis open. You can do that. I don't tend to do that myself. I definitely don't teach that. The main thing is that the pelvis and the hip joints can be quite sensitive area where it's more like you're inviting the body to open if it wants to, and if it doesn't want to, making it open is not gonna have the desired effect anyway. If you are looking to extend your flexibility a little bit, the main thing I would suggest would be taking your hands round the back of your feet, taking your elbows onto your thighs, and the only thing that you're doing is putting a little bit of attention or a little bit of contact down through the elbows, so that it's not a forceful movement, but there's a direction in it. And whenever I do a tailor pose or anything where I'm opening wide with the hips and the legs, I would tend to always come back into a really nice position where I've got the feeling of the legs drawing in, the knees drawing in, and that kind of drawing back together again. So the little bit like a flower, the flower can open, the flower can close, and that is a natural part of the process. So it's not just a quick open the flower as much as possible. So we would want both. And then the other thing that can be nice to do from Tailor pose is to take your hands onto the floor, close in beside your hips, and then you can lift yourself up so you can get that feeling of opening out and up through the diaphragm and wide out and across the upper chest. So you can start to get a feeling of a nice back bend. You can take your hands down into it. You can obviously lean yourself all the way back to reclining Badakanasana so that you can be resting out, which is a lovely way to have a little bit of a rest. I quite like taking my hands together and elbows wide when I'm doing this. It just feels like a nice kind of connection between the shoulder girdle and the hands and the hip girdle and the legs. So you can do Badakanasana. And the other thing that you can do is you can do the sort of work that we do in cat pose, so where we're arching and releasing. So you just take your hands around your legs somewhere, so it could be your thighs, and you're allowing yourself to round back, so the body rounds back or the back rounds back. And then as you inhale, you'd come forwards, get that feeling of that little lifting up and through, and you just go back and forth with your own breathing. So you're looking at that mobility of the spine and that easy movement of the spine as you're working. So that is quite a lot of Badakanasana for you. I hope you really enjoy Badakanasana over the week, and that you can engage with your inner tailor, because that's its other phrase. So tailor pose, the idea being that this is how you'd be sitting doing your sewing, so that it becomes a position that can be very comfortable and held for long periods of time. A little safety thing being, if you're pregnant and there's any pelvic issues, this is not going to be a helpful pose. And if you've got varicosities through the legs, particularly, you want to be opening and closing the legs. You don't want to be sitting like a tailor for extended periods of time, for hours, or even if you do have varicose veins of any sort, I would say give yourself maybe 2 minutes and then move out and then come back into it and come out. So coming back and forth to keep the Venus return going. So I hope you really enjoy Tailor pose. That is your challenge for the week, to really get on board with it and find ways that you really love doing it, and find some other things that you can do in Tailor pose. Might be you doing cow arms, or who knows, your breathing practice whilst you're here. All these things are lovely things to do. Hope you have a lovely week, and